Welcome to the Daily Coffee Pro, friends. Today's episode of the podcast is brought to you by Elixir of Specialty Coffee. Looks like whiskey, feels like tea, made from coffee, and unlike anything you've ever tasted before, head to elixirofspecialtycoffee.com and enter code IMAPITFORWARD to receive 10% off your first purchase today. Today on the Daily Coffee Pro, we are looking at the humble macchiato, and you may be wondering why. I have singled out this particular beverage to talk about because the discussion isn't really about the macchiato on its own. The macchiato is one of those interesting beverages that even when I was working in the Australian coffee scene, it seemed pretty standard to know what a macchiato was. Macchiato in Italian means stain. And so in Australia, a macchiato is 3 layers. There's a picture of this on the Map It Forward at iMapItForward Instagram. But the traditional Italian version of a macchiato is in 3 layers. You've got the espresso layer, you've got the froth layer, and you've got the espresso layer so that you can see the 3 different layers. And it's literally supposed to be just a stain of the froth into the macchiato. So you can have a single macchiato or you can have a double macchiato. The Australian coffee industry has its roots heavily steeped in the Italian espresso culture, and the macchiato is probably the greatest homage that we pay to the Italian espresso scene, that and the espresso itself. But the interesting thing is that when I came to America and have been working in the American coffee scene as a business owner and going to different cafes to experience what their offerings are, the vast number of definitions that they have for macchiato is absolutely fascinating. In Australia, a macchiato is served in a small piccolo cup or an espresso cup, maximum 4.5 ounces, and it takes up like less than half of the cup. Here, a macchiato can be as big as 16 ounces. If you get a caramel macchiato from Starbucks, you can get like, I don't know what the biggest sizes are. I think it's a venti. It's big and it's full of milk, and the stain is actually the espresso, if I've got that right. So they fill the cup up with milk, and then they stain it with the espresso, which is an interesting take on a macchiato, and it's got caramel in it if it's a caramel macchiato. So this has got me thinking as I'm getting ready for a consultation job that I'm doing around the menu that my client will be offering, because I see different people defining macchiato in a different way. And it got me thinking, like, what happens here in America when you as a barista walk into a shop that you're going to be working at, and let's say you're used to making a traditional macchiato that is, as I described, an espresso with a little stain of froth from the milk that you've textured. And you go in there and they have a completely different version of a macchiato. This happened to me when I first moved here, and I was just messing around on bar with someone, and the way that they make a macchiato in most places here, most specialty shops, is that they'll take an espresso cup and they'll just fill it to the top with textured milk, similar to what in Australia we would call a piccolo latte, but they serve it in an espresso cup. And so I would go in and think that's an interesting take on a macchiato, and I was asking the person who was running the bar and put the beverage program together, or helped put the beverage program together, and he mentioned that that's just how specialty coffee does it here. And I I wonder where's the line? I don't agree or disagree with anyone's version of anything really. Like, to me, whatever you choose to offer is what you choose to offer, and good for you. Like, as long as, but here's the key thing. You have to be able to explain your offerings. And this is the whole thing about what I wanted this episode of the Daily Coffee Pro to be about. Your menu is your menu. And you offer a piccolo or a macchiato or a cappuccino or any of these things the way that you want to offer them. But you must be able to explain why you offer it that way, because you will get asked. If you're a specialty store, if you're considering yourself a specialty store that makes coffee, I'm trying to term it that way because the term specialty coffee is really lost its shine for me. But if you're a specialty store that makes coffee, serving a 16-ounce macchiato is going to stump people. But if you're able to explain your reasoning behind that, they'll be able to get on board. I was with an Australian friend the other day, and we went to a second wave coffee shop, and he ordered a double macchiato filled up halfway. And it was interesting. He's an Italian Aussie and is a coffee professional from Australia and living here. When I asked him why he ordered his coffee like that, and he said, well, it's about as close as I can get to a 3/4 latte from back home. So it's interesting to see the way that different customers have to adapt to the different shifts in menus that cafes offer. That's different here in the US. Like, that's not how it is in Australia. In Australia, most menus are pretty standard. Like, a macchiato is a macchiato everywhere. A cappuccino is a cappuccino everywhere. A latte is the same everywhere. Here, a macchiato can be many, many, many different things. And so when people say to me, how should I approach putting my menu together? Here's some free advice about that. Like I said, know how to talk about your menu. Know why you're serving the beverages the way that you're serving them. Be able to tell the origin story of how you came about deciding about your menu and your offerings to any customers that might ask. Because even if they disagree with the way that you are serving, for example, a macchiato, they may be asking so that they can figure out, like my friend Angelo, how to get closest to the beverage they actually want to drink. So if they can't decide how to order, whether they should be ordering a latte or a macchiato, to get closest to the beverage that they actually want, you being able to talk about the beverage in an intelligent way that helps them understand what it's constructed of is going to help them know how to order next time they come into your shop. One last thing. If you're an employee going into a new job and you are looking at the way that your new employer is making beverages, if you haven't accepted the job yet and you are still trialing, that's the time to figure out if you are aligned with the menu offerings, and spend some time asking them, how do you make this? How do you make that? What's constructed of this? What your macchiato is different to the way that I'm used to making a macchiato. Why do you make it the way that you make it? Your trial is the time to ask those questions. It is a part of your future employer's selling philosophy. So we've talked previously about in other podcast episodes that when you go to interview with an employer, you should be asking them about their buying philosophy. So how do they purchase their coffee and their produce that they're going to be offering in the cafe? Asking about their selling philosophy is equally as important, because you're the person who's going to have to actually be doing the selling. Now, if you're not on board with selling a 16-ounce latte, I would suggest that if you can't get on board with it, it's probably not going to be the best place for you to work. Knowing this ahead of time is going to help you make those decisions and help you know if you can align with the selling philosophy. If you can't get aligned, you are conspiring against yourself. It's really important to know these things before you accept a job. Before I go, we are making a big announcement this week, and I hope that if you're not on the mailing list, you get on the mailing list so that you can find out, or tune into this podcast. I will be making the announcement tomorrow on episode 100 of the Daily Coffee Pro. So please tune in and subscribe, rate and review this podcast wherever you're looking at it or listening to it. Peace, love and peanut butter, friends. Have an amazing rest of